Hey, how are you guys and gals? What would you do if, at the moment of your birth, you were switched with a baby from another family? But not only that, but years later, when you want to investigate your own past, you meet a girl who turns out to be the baby you were swapped with on the day of your birth. And in addition to this, she also wants to be your partner, just for convenience. Well, that's more or less what Kakkou no Iinazuke, the anime in this video, is about. The anime begins by showing us the past, where we witness the birth of two babies who arrived in the world on the same day at the same hospital. However, to the misfortune of both, the nurses made the grave mistake of placing them in the wrong cribs, so unfortunately, these babies changed families without them realizing it. Now in the present, several years after these events, we finally meet one of those babies who will be our protagonist. His name is Nagi. Nagi is a teenager who had to live with a low-income family and has an adopted younger sister named Saki Umino. By this point in his life, he already knows everything about his past because we see that he has photos from when he was a child, and he has even discussed the topic with Sachi. In addition to this, today being his birthday, he has planned a meeting to meet his biological parents. With some concern, his sister asks him if he plans to return to his biological family, to which Nagi responds that he doesn't, as he doesn't want to change the 16 years he has lived here with her. However, all of this would be thrown out the window later that same day when, on his way to the library, the boy encounters a young girl who at first seemed like she wanted to jump off a bridge, but after a few seconds, we are explained that she was actually just recording a video to upload to one of her social networks. This girl turns out to be Erika Amano, a very beautiful high school girl who is quite famous on the internet and will also be a beloved waifu in this story. She seems to have life figured out since she is a millionaire and has many positive things to highlight. However, there is something that worries her a lot. Her wealthy father wants to force her to marry a man she doesn't love, so she is now trying to hide to avoid this. But this doesn't surprise Nagi much because his situation is also quite difficult for a teenager of his age to process. The thing is, unlike the boy, Erika is much crazier in her way of living life, and for this reason, she suddenly blackmails him with the video she was recording to become her boyfriend, to which he accepts without resistance. She did all of this so that our waifu can avoid the responsibilities that come with her arranged marriage. Now we jump straight to their impromptu date, where she tries to take some photos to deceive her social media followers into believing that she already has a boyfriend. Unfortunately, none of the photos she takes convince her, as Erika needs something that conveys the emotions of the moment, and none of the photos she took did that. Upon hearing this, Nagi realizes that the two come from different worlds. Just as he was about to tell the girl this, some strange guys appear and start bothering her because, according to them, Erika lied to their faces. In short, these guys are part of a fan club for Erika because for them she is their idol and they believe that their idol cannot have a partner. At one point, the guys go too far in bothering Erika, so Nagi decides to end this drama and uses his Umino family skills to scare these guys away once and for all. Upon seeing this, she becomes convinced that the protagonist is a great man, and just before going home, she confesses that she had a great time on the date. To further win him over, she tells him that she always wished her arranged marriage could be with someone as free and fun as him, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. A few hours later, we see that her wish actually did come true because now during Nagi's meeting with his biological parents, we find out that Erika is the other baby they were exchanged with at birth, thus beginning our protagonist's new life, where he will have to deal with who is now his future wife. So ironically, the plan of becoming fake boyfriends to avoid Erika's arranged marriage ultimately backfired on them because it seems both families are convinced that it's much easier to commit to a couple that was already in love from before. This news completely ruins Nagi's plans since he is in love with his classmate named Segawa. It's even worse for him since our waifu is very serious about marrying him because she wants to satisfy her father's whims at all costs. Changing the subject that same morning, Erika decides to make a surprise visit to the Umino family's house, and Saki doesn't like this at all because, realistically, it means she has to start living with a new person in her life who is biologically her true older sister, something she doesn't really like. However, as all of this is a process that will take time, first, let's go to the part where Nagi notices that Erika is very uncomfortable being in a place that is not like the luxurious mansion she lives in. So the girl decides to take the protagonist to her home, which, as you can imagine, is 10 times bigger and more impeccable than Nagi's apartment. Once at the place, we see that Nagi's goal is to find the kindest way to reject the engagement with the girl, although to his good fortune, she beats him to it and tells him that she doesn't want to marry someone as poor as him. The only reason she came to his house was that she wanted to talk to her biological parents. With this in mind, Nagi decides to take her to the Umino family restaurant so she can finish what she is pending. Although initially he does seem a bit worried about the attitudes that someone like Erika might exhibit, his parents relieve him of all the stress as they personally attend to their daughter as if she were a true princess. The problem is that, for some reason we don't quite understand, after a while, Erika runs out of the restaurant without saying a word. To dispel any doubts about what happened to her, the protagonist follows her and runs as fast as he can to see if he can find her to talk to her. Luckily, the girl wasn't very far away, and it's there where, in tears, she confesses to Nagi that she ran from the restaurant because she's afraid of ruining the affection her parents showed her with some of her annoying attitudes. For that same reason, all she could do at that moment was flee the restaurant without saying anything. Upon hearing this, the protagonist tries to understand how Erika feels, so with some kind words, he tells her that the parents she has would never do that because he knows what good people they are. And no matter how much her behavior is like that of a spoiled and hateful child, they will continue to love her as the daughter they never could raise. With the problem resolved, on the way back home, Erika's father, by the way named Tsuchiru Amano, meets the protagonist and our waifu, and he tells them that from now on, the two of them will live together in a house he bought specifically for their arranged marriage, to which they both are left perplexed. The protagonist knows how to take advantage of this whim on Tsuchiru's part. Thanks to having their own house now, this also means that each of them will have their own room where they can do whatever they want, stay up as late as they want, and without anyone interrupting them. This makes the boy very happy, just knowing that he can stay up late. Obviously, he's not a weirdo. He's clearly going to use his room to study, but the downside comes afterward when the other part of sharing a living space with someone else appears, and it's even worse if it's his future wife. In short, living together between the protagonist and Erika becomes a bit tense because on one hand, and on the other hand, we have the fact that both of them, from the beginning, decided to live their lives separately. So after a while, their relationship doesn't seem to be the best. It's not until the protagonist's cell phone battery dies that there's finally some progress in his relationship with Erika. Apparently, Nagi couldn't bring anything from his old home, meaning he has no study materials, so for our protagonist to get his things from his old home, he'll have to beg the girl to ask her butlers to at least bring him his study materials. To Nagi's misfortune, the girl wasn't going to accept this, or maybe she would, but only if he helps her with a certain issue. This isn't strange at all, since what Erika asks him for is that he helps her take the best photos for her social media, something he accepts without much trouble. The interesting thing happens when, in one of those photos, Nagi manages to take two pictures that fulfill what Erika always wanted, that is, to convey the true emotion of that moment. Thanks to this moment, the girl can gain more confidence in the protagonist, and this is where we find out that she's doing all this to find a very important person in her life, whom she remembers she hasn't seen since their last encounter when she was a child. After this, Erika completely changed the conversation, and likewise, Nagi didn't keep insisting on that topic, because the next morning when he arrives at school, the boy sees that he has a new problem that is much more important than the past of a person he doesn't even know. The problem we're talking about is that a couple of weeks ago, the protagonist created a very exaggerated scene where he declared war on exams to Hiro, who, as we remember, is the girl he's in love with and also has the best grades in the entire school. Ironically, this plan of the protagonist turned out better than expected because that morning when he arrives at his locker, he finds the surprise that inside there's a letter from Hiro telling him that she's waiting for him on the rooftop in the building after school, so he couldn't be happier. Despite this, Nagi initially thought that all of this was a joke, and another thing that makes him happy is that, in class, the teacher hands out the results of the practice exam to everyone, and to his surprise, he finally managed to be the top student in the class. So we could say his happiness level is over 9,000. In a burst of euphoria, he decides that today will be the day he confesses to Hiro, because, as we mentioned before, he was just waiting to beat her in an exam to take the initiative to confess his love for her. So later, when the protagonist goes up to the rooftop to talk to the girl, all of his hopes crumble because she tells him that from now on, the real battle to determine who is truly the smartest person in the school begins, and in the process, she wants to prove that he only beat her out of sheer luck. Despite this, Hiro's words only make him fall even more in love with her, but to his misfortune, his happiness doesn't last long because, due to the overexertion he made in recent days to be the best in class, he got a fever, so the boy won't be able to study properly for his upcoming exams. Fortunately, this sacrifice serves him well because after a few weeks, when the new exam results come in, we see that the protagonist once again ranks higher than Hiro on the overall leaderboard. With this in mind, Nagi decides to regain his motivation to try to confess to Hiro. Despite not having the opportunity to do so throughout the day, the story repeats itself in the end. Once again, she asks him through a letter to meet on the rooftop to discuss what just happened in the exams. However, this time the boy manages to confess to Hiro, but to his misfortune, she rejects him. It turns out that Hiro is too competitive, and as they had been in this competition before, she tells him that this victory doesn't count either, as she still needs to recover from the 10 times she had beaten him in previous years. Ironically, the protagonist applies the same logic, tells her that he would only need to beat her in another 10 exams to snatch the record for the highest score from her, and in the process, leave her with no excuses to accept his confession now. Despite making a lot of sense, Hiro has to decline once again because as much as she wants to see him as a love interest, she can't accept it since her family has arranged a marriage for her with a boy from another important family. Despite the girl repeatedly saying no, the protagonist continues to try to win her over, and in summary, he now thinks that she said this to get his help in escaping an arranged marriage with a man she doesn't even know, similar to what happened with Erika. However, just when Nagi was thinking about how to execute his plan to save her from the arranged marriage, Erika arrives to tell him that the probationary period for newlyweds has ended, and since they made no progress during this time, each of them can return to their respective homes and live their lives as they were before getting into all this chaos. After a few hours, we see that everything remains the same because Nagi can't return to his old apartment due to construction work in the building, and Erika doesn't want to go back to live in the mansion with her other parents. In the end, they have no choice but to stay in their matrimonial house and live together even though they don't want to, at least for a couple more months until everything returns to normal. While all of this was happening in the temporary Yumino apartment, we see that Saki became somewhat jealous because her brother Nagi couldn't return to live with them. So taking advantage of the fact that the protagonist is missing some of his things, she decides to bring them to his new home and pay a surprise visit to meet her biological younger sister. As expected, this news makes Erika very nervous because this would be the first time she meets her younger sister. But fortunately, Nagi decides to act in favor of the girls, and with a couple of good ideas and some delicious food, he manages to ease the tense situation between them and, above all, leaves them in a good atmosphere so that both can continue building their sisterly bonds as they should. Anyway, despite the protagonist being a bit happy about seeing how he helped bring his family together, the next day everything takes a turn for the worse. He starts to remember what Hiro told him the day before about her arranged marriage, and to make matters worse, when they arrive at school, they run into each other first thing in the library. Initially, this situation was uncomfortable for both of them because apparently, this is the first time in all these months that they've attempted to study together. However, after a while, the tension subsides as they both discover that they share the same passion for collecting temple stamps. Just when everything seemed to be finally improving for our protagonist, later in class, he receives the news that a new student is joining their group this semester, and to his misfortune, that new student is none other than Erika. Nagi obviously confronts Erika about this for not asking him beforehand, but the thing is he doesn't have the right to say anything because technically it's his fault that she had to change schools. To explain a bit, everything happened during the week when the protagonist got a serious fever from overstudying because a photo of Erika with him leaked on social media during those days. Since she stayed with him the whole time taking care of him, she couldn't go to her own school to clear up this misunderstanding, so she was forced to change schools. Erika managed to enter the same school as the protagonist thanks to her father's connections because if it were based on her grades, it would have been much more complicated. Besides all of this, we see that Erika encounters a couple of problems with the rest of her classmates in the first few hours because apparently no one knows how to approach someone so famous. Remember, she has thousands of followers on her social media, so she's basically a celebrity. Because of this, Hiro, being the class representative, decides to take the first step to talk to her. Initially, the protagonist becomes paranoid because he's afraid Erika will bring up the topic of their engagement. However, after observing that both of them seem to get along well, he ultimately decides not to say anything so that they can continue building their friendship. But the funny thing is that as soon as he takes his eyes off them for a second, Hiro starts crying out of nowhere. To prevent their relationship from breaking due to a misunderstanding, Nagi appears and starts listing all the good things about Erika in an effort to save her from this problem. Despite his efforts, our protagonist only ends up looking weird because what was actually happening between the girls is that Hiro is apparently a huge fan of Erika, to the point that she couldn't hold back tears of excitement from spending the day with her favorite influencer. Later that same day, on the way back home, aside from noticing that Hiro has started to have a slight suspicion about the possible relationship between Erika and Nagi, we also see that out of nowhere, she decides that from now on, the three of them will form a study group that will meet every morning in the library without excuses. With no other options, both of them accept, and by nightfall, Nagi decides to tell Erika the rest of his story at school, specifically the part where he confessed his feelings to Hiro and how she rejected him until he fulfills the condition of beating her in 10 more exams. With this in mind, Erika feels it's best to support their relationship, but the problem is that no matter how hard they try not to appear as a couple brought together by an arranged marriage, everything they do ends up giving that impression to everyone, and Hiro doesn't take this very well. As a result, she now wants to do everything possible to get closer to Erika. To fix this, Hiro's best idea is to ask Erika to invite her to her house. However, since the house she lives in now is the one she shares with Nagi, our waifu comes up with a great idea of taking her to the old mansion, where she used to live with her other parents. Upon hearing this conversation, the protagonist decides to use his entire afternoon to fully enjoy the comforts offered by the house left to them by his biological father. But to his misfortune, the fun doesn't last long because just a couple of hours later, for some reason he doesn't even understand himself, Erika and Hiro appear at the door ready to enter the living room. To understand why this happened, it turns out that since the Amano mansion was undergoing renovations, one of the family's maids accidentally mentioned that Miss Erika had an additional house near the city. So Erika had no choice but to bring Hiro to the place where she's living with Nagi, even though she didn't want to. With a clear view of the situation, Erika manages to create a couple of good distractions, mainly trying to gain some extra time for the protagonist to hide all his stuff and avoid raising more suspicions about their relationship outside of school. Luckily for both of them, this plan works out quite well, and although they had a few unexpected visits along the way and an accident with Nagi's stamp book, in the end, everything is resolved without major issues. This allows them to easily accept Hiro's invitation the following morning to visit her home. To make it easier to understand, since Hiro doesn't want to give Nagi a chance to get closer to Erika, her simplest plan was to bring them to her home, which is a shrine, and there explain how her life works and why she carries all the responsibilities she does despite being so young. According to what we're told, Hiro is the heir to an important temple, which makes the concept of an arranged marriage quite normal in her life. However, she doesn't want to tell Erika about this part because she feels it would be an unnecessary burden on someone who doesn't belong to it. On the other hand, in the case of our protagonist, it's different. She feels she can freely talk to him about it, and that if something goes wrong in the process, she can cry on his shoulder or simply be comforted by him. After a couple of days, we see that Nagi is a bit thoughtful because of the last conversation he had at the temple with the girls. This almost causes him to forget to fill out the permission slip for the school trip, where, luckily, if he does things right, he can go together with Hiro. The excursion is in pairs, and we know how much our protagonist likes Hiro. With this in mind, Nagi does his best to convince Hiro to go on the trip together. Although he manages to persuade her, the problem is that she only accepts it as an outing with a classmate because no matter how much they both want to try something different, the arranged marriage in her family limits them from taking the next step in their relationship. However, she tells him that if he manages to beat her the remaining 10 times in exams and above all, proves that he is a trustworthy man, she might give him a chance to be more than just classmates. Thanks to these words, the protagonist is highly motivated to excel in his studies. But once again, things get complicated for him. Unfortunately, one of his classmates has been bothering the teachers all week to make their group consist of 4 people instead of 3. He does this with the aim of being with Erika and trying to get closer to her. What's interesting here is that Erika hadn't planned to go on the field trip because it seems her family is very strict about her safety, and they rarely allowed her to participate in such activities. However, considering the situation, she is now the one offering to go to help Nagi in his quest to win Hiro's heart. On the day of the excursion, before getting on the bus, we meet Shayama, an annoying guy who joined our protagonist's group after insisting so much and has a particular fondness for Erika. Cheyenne asks Nagi if it bothers him that he tries to win over Erika, and although initially he responds that Cheyenne can do whatever he wants as long as he doesn't interrupt his time with Hiro, after a while, we see that his actions are very different from what he had said before the trip began. It turns out that the protagonist spends the whole day watching over Erika and Cheyenne to the point where it even annoys Hiro. She decides to distance herself from him to go look for new temple stamps to add to her stamp book. In the afternoon, Erika scolds Nagi for his toxic and controlling behavior, but she doesn't feel it's entirely wrong because in the end, whether they like it or not, they are engaged. So it's normal for the man to feel jealous when he sees his future wife with another guy who is not him, especially if that guy is a complete loser. Back at home, Nagi questions whether he really has the right to interfere in Erika's life in this way. After all, the only thing Erika is interested in right now is finding that special person from her past, so it doesn't make much sense for him to be so jealous over something that doesn't even concern him. Suddenly, Saki appears to visit Erika, but since she couldn't find her anywhere, she decides to interrogate Nagi to find out why he's so distracted. Although she was initially aggressive with him, it ends up working because she eventually learns all the gossip from the school trip a few days ago. She tells Nagi to stop being so stubborn and that if he wants to be a worthy person, he should support Erika in her search for that special person. After having a motivational conversation where a couple of childhood memories resurface, Nagi finally gathers the courage to help his fiancée with her quest for that special person. The problem here is that for some reason we may not understand, Saki misinterprets everything her brother just said, and in a fit of jealousy, out of nowhere, she packs up her things from her old home and arrives at the marital home within an hour, announcing that she will now come to live with them. This leaves our protagonist stunned. As expected, Nagi opposes this, thinking it's just a tantrum from his sister. But after arguing for a while and hearing the reasons she supposedly wants to move to this place, Nagi has no choice but to accept her request and leave the rest in Erika's hands, all while he prepares dinner. Later, in Erika's room, Saki confesses that the real reason she wanted to move to this house is because she believes things have changed in her family since the Amanos arrived, especially since she feels she's growing apart from the brother she shared a significant part of her life with. So she basically decided to move in with them to be close to her brother. As Nagi listens to this, he starts to remember that they've never been separated from each other. Without thinking twice, he decides to call his parents to inform them that Sachi will now be under their care. The next morning, the three of them go out shopping to buy the things that the new family member, Saki, needs. It's during this outing that Nagi begins to realize that purely by chance of fate, he's now living with two beautiful women. So in an attempt to handle everything in the most friendly manner possible, later that day, he takes a risk and talks to Erika about the topic of her special person. Nagi offers his help in finding that someone she's been searching for so long that suddenly all seriousness goes out the window as Erika bursts into loud laughter in front of him. Amidst her laughter, she tells him that if he really wants to help her, he must first be ready to bear the weight of the truth that's about to come his way. Clearly, these words leave Nagi quite concerned. Due to these words, Nagi tries to distract himself for a while by studying. While he rested, Saki, who had just finished showering, noticed a message on her brother's phone from a girl asking for a date at the amusement park this weekend. As expected, the message is from Hiro. On this day, Nagi wears a rather embarrassing outfit and even Erika mocks how bad he looks. Nevertheless, this doesn't subtract any points from his date because once they are inside the amusement park, we see that they both have a great time together. They even share a fun moment where it seemed like Nagi managed to kiss Hiro, but in reality, he only kissed her reflection in the House of Mirrors. At the same time, on the other hand, we see that Saki is not having a good time. Her toxic jealousy towards Nagi is so overwhelming that not even Erika knows how to comfort her, as Saki can't stand seeing her brother having a good time with a girl who isn't her. Although this might sound pretty bad after getting to know her better, we realize that Saki hates it when other girls get close to her brother. But fortunately for Erika, this isn't a problem because she sees Saki as a sister, and she knows she's Nagi's fiancé. Later, back at home, the whole group gathers, and nothing strange happens until the early hours of the next day when Yuhei Yumino, Nagi's father, unexpectedly shows up to take them on a family fishing trip. It seems that Yuhei organized this to integrate Erika more into the Yumino family environment because if we talk about the biological side, technically she is his real daughter, and he is her real father. But until now, they hadn't had the chance to get to know each other better, as it appears that Mr. Yumino was still saddened by Saki leaving home. To everyone's surprise, these four have a great time on this family outing. Despite Nagi being embarrassed as usual, the goal of the fishing trip is achieved because Erika feels happy experiencing a bit of what it could have been like to share her life with the Yumino family. Continuing with the topic of families, a couple of weeks later, we reach Mother's Day, and we see that Saki asks Nagi to accompany her to the mall to find something they can give as a gift to their mother, Nami Yumino. They stroll through all the stores and consider numerous gift options, but none of their ideas seem to match their mother's free-spirited and resilient personality. In the end, they decide to go with something practical, a new apron, so she can continue working in the restaurant but with a refreshed look. Although this might initially seem like a simple gift, we later see that Nami was delighted with this gesture from her children. Days after all of this, on a quiet morning when Nagi had planned to study all day, he is suddenly interrupted by Erika. Without explaining much, she simply enters his room and rushes him out of the house to the furthest library. Once they are there, we find out what happened. In summary, today Soichiro, her father, wanted to visit their home, but it seems she didn't want to see him. That's why she decided to run away from there before he could surprise them halfway or, in the worst case, catch them walking together on the street. Ironically, in the end, it's Sachi who finds Soichiro in the living room. Initially, they clash a bit because they don't know each other very well, but after a while, Soichiro invites her to dinner as he took a liking to her. He also asks her about the relationship between the married couple living in the house, meaning Nagi and Erika. Obviously, Saki wouldn't say anything that would compromise her brother, so she tells him that everything is going as it should in their relationship with two committed teenagers. Soichiro believes her to some extent, but everything changes when he sees that Saki is jealous of how well Nagi is getting along with Erika. This image pleases Soichiro considerably, and as he returns to his office, he shows a photo that leaves us with many questions. In the photo, his whole family is gathered, but the intriguing detail is that there's a young boy in the middle whom we hadn't seen before. We can deduce that this young boy was Nagi when he was a child. This secret is known only by Soichiro and his wife, so let's go back to Saki, who after having dinner with this gentleman decided to spend some time with her family, as a strong thunderstorm began raging throughout the city. At the same time, in our protagonist's house, due to the lightning, the power went out. Unfortunately, Nagi and Erika found themselves without battery on their cell phones, revealing that both of them are afraid of the dark. Amidst all this chaos, with no other options for survival, they decide to light a candle and stay together while they talk about their lives, waiting for the electricity to return. This helps them deepen their relationship a bit, making it easier to accept the topic of their arranged marriage. Both Erika and Nagi feel that their lives have changed completely since they met. Just before Erika can share a reflective message about this moment, they both remember that the house has an emergency generator in case of power outages. Since she's too scared to go alone, the responsibility falls on our protagonist. Despite not knowing the way very well, he manages to reach the switches, but due to the darkness, he ends up tripping over a person whom he even hugs and kisses by mistake. Initially, Nagi thought it was Erika because only the two of them were supposed to be in the house. However, as the lights come back on, he realizes that it was actually Sachi who had somehow sneaked into the house in the midst of the storm, and for that reason, no one had noticed she was there. The thing is, when Nagi sees his little sister's face, his expression changes, but not in the way the young girl expected. Instead, he tells her to forget about all of this and quite casually leaves the room without paying much attention to the kiss it just shared. As expected, Sachi gets upset at her brother's insensitivity in this situation. To express her anger, she decides not to speak to Nagi for weeks and ignores him at all times despite living in the same house. Not understanding what is going on, Nagi tells Erika about the kissing incident, hoping she might give him some advice on how to mend things with his sister. Obviously, she wouldn't miss the opportunity to highlight his incompetence, but at least she helps him in this case. She makes him realize that he can't keep seeing Sachi as a child because she stopped being one a long time ago. In fact, the next morning, Hiro tells him that for a woman, the gesture of kissing someone is something that is done only with a special person, as it means a lot to a girl's heart. Once the situation is clear, Nagi gathers his courage to apologize to his sister. Despite making it clear that he will never stop seeing her as part of his family, he additionally tells her that he will try to see her as a woman in his life, one he should appreciate for who she is. Fortunately, Saki takes it well, and this resolves the issue. After resolving this issue, our protagonist can return to his normal activities. Although Erika initially planned to interrupt their morning plans, Nagi quickly stops her because he doesn't want anyone to disrupt his study date with Hiro. After spending the whole morning playing and reviewing topics for upcoming exams, Hiro takes Nagi to a gym where she planned for him to help her with her boxing training. However, since the young girl was very well endowed in certain areas, Nagi couldn't concentrate and everything went awry. But the problems don't end there because while they were both training hard to take a break from studying, Erika happened to pass by. Apparently, she didn't appreciate the idea of her future fiancé having fun with another woman other than her. With a bit of jealousy in her heart, Erika insists that Nagi have a date with her this weekend. When the time for their date arrives, they do many things together, from shopping for clothes to visiting a pet store or even going for a run. Despite all this, nothing convinces Erika because she's looking for something more genuine and not forced or fake. To understand the reason for Erika's jealousy, it turns out she's upset because in all the months she's been living with Nagi, he has never given her a sincere smile like the one he had on his face yesterday when he was with Hiro. Erika understands that it's difficult to compete with the girl Nagi likes, but she can't help feeling jealous when she sees her fiancé not paying much attention to her because he's spending time with another woman. The funny thing is when Nagi hears this, he directly asks her if she's not in love with him, which she doesn't deny but also doesn't fully accept. She tells him literally, "I'm not in love with you yet," implying that maybe over time she will develop feelings for him, but she needs more time to figure out what her heart truly wants. This applies to Nagi as well, and Nagi is left pondering why his heart races every time he thinks of Erika, when it should only happen when he thinks of Hiro. As Nagi can't find an answer to this, he decides to visit his parents' house to find a book. Unfortunately, once he arrives there, he ends up thinking about romance, all thanks to his father sharing a bit of his love story. Yui tells him that he had to go through many rejections before successfully winning over Nami, who was the most beautiful girl in their entire school and consequently the most challenging to persuade. Naturally, he managed to win her heart as she is now his wife. However, the crucial part of this story is the advice that comes out of this conversation between father and son. Yui advises Nagi that since love is a very complex matter, the easiest way to determine if he truly likes a girl is to imagine her saying his name out loud. If, when he thinks of that, he can see the woman he desires, then his heart only has eyes for her. Now, when Nagi tries this advice, he hears 3 voices. This leaves Nagi with even more doubts than he had initially before coming here. Nevertheless, in the midst of all his confusion, he takes the risk of sending a message to Erika responding to what she told him earlier this morning. "I think you don't like me yet either." All these emotions make things more complicated for our protagonist to the point where he can't even fully concentrate during exam week. As a result, after a few weeks, we see that he ranked 13th in his class for the first time in his life. Although this might sound a bit exaggerated to others, it's significant in his particular case because he was always used to being among the top 2 students in the entire school, and now he can't even make it into the top 10 of his class. What truly upsets him, however, is seeing the disappointed look on Hiro's face from a distance. Without saying a word, she turns her back on him and leaves. All of this sends our protagonist into depression. While in this state of mind, he at least remembers all the good times he had during these past few months and realizes that even though his grades have dropped, everything he experienced during this time was the best thing that ever happened to him. After a few hours of this, Erika comes to find him, but not in the way you might expect. She's actually there because she's very hungry and angry that dinner isn't ready yet. However, once she arrives, she gives him a motivational talk and Nagi didn't expect it to be so profound. She tells him it doesn't matter if you're first or last to others, to me, you'll always be worth the same. This clearly lifts his spirits. Upon hearing this, the protagonist fully regains confidence in his abilities, and without making any more excuses, the next day he returns to his routine of waking up early to be the first one at the library to study tirelessly. Ironically, that morning, Nagi is only with Erika because just as Hiro was arriving, she saw how well these two were getting along, and in a fit of jealousy, she decided not to enter to avoid interrupting their study date. Unfortunately for Nagi, these attitudes last much longer than expected, and with the passing hours, we see that tensions are increasing between the two, and there wasn't much hope for improvement. However, an anonymous letter appears in the boy's locker. Amidst nervousness, the protagonist assumes that the letter is from Hiro, so without thinking twice, he goes straight to where Erika is to ask for advice. To his misfortune, it turns out Erika is more naive than he is, so instead of helping with his problem, she only makes him more nervous. Later in the afternoon, we see Nagi having one of his typical self-deprecating scenes without fully understanding why he's doing it. In any case, Hiro clarifies that she's not angry with him, but rather a bit sad. After they receive the results, she never had the opportunity to approach him and ask how he was doing, and she regrets not being able to support him in the same way Erika did. This is good news for the protagonist, who once again regains confidence in his abilities, and after a few hours, he returns to being his usual self. But now, a new and much more complex problem presents itself, one that's more challenging than all the previous ones. The problem we're talking about revolves around Erika, as her grades dropped significantly to the point where her father told her that if she doesn't pass the next exams, she'll be obligated to return to her old school and move back to her old house. So Erika asked our protagonist for help with her studies. Ironically, he also ends up being Saki's tutor because she needs to prepare for her high school entrance exams. As hours pass, the protagonist loses hope in his students, but especially loses his faith in Erika because in the 3 hours they've been studying, she couldn't solve a single exercise correctly. This angers the protagonist, and they unintentionally end up arguing to the point where Erika gives up and tells him that in the end, she knew she would have to follow her father's whims because her entire life has depended on the money and connections her family has. Later in the evening, when Nagi goes down to the kitchen to prepare coffee, he sees Sachi lying on the couch, which seems unusual to him because she shares a room with Erika. This is when he learns that Erika didn't actually give up on her studies. Because of this, the protagonist decides to give Erika another chance. So his heart wouldn't allow him to abandon his fiancée in such an important situation for her future. With this in mind, they both get to work with their studies, and after a few weeks, they can celebrate their victory because in the end, she managed to pass all her subjects with more than acceptable grades. With no more obstacles in their path, the protagonist can fully focus on the upcoming fireworks festival. Since his family has a restaurant business, it's common for him to help with setting up the food booth and attending to customers. When the day arrives, we find out that the entire festival is sponsored by Hiro's temple. Ironically, she shows up later at the protagonist's restaurant to invite him for a walk once he's done with his work. Although the initial idea was also to invite Saki, Hiro decides not to because Saki gets too jealous over anything. So we fast forward to the evening when the whole group of girls gathers to enjoy the remaining fireworks event. Unfortunately for them, the protagonist arrived later than expected, and while waiting for him, we see that Erika accidentally refers to Saki as her younger sister. This raises suspicions for Hiro, who had been suspecting the peculiar relationship she had with Yumino family. From this moment on, things get weird because we see that our protagonist's plans change completely. In the end, without really knowing how, he ends up spending the night with Erika instead of having the supposed festival date with Hiro. Despite this, the two of them manage to enjoy what's left of the festival. With the passing of a few hours, they show us that Erika is very happy to be in these kinds of situations with Nagi. Moreover, not even the who used to harass the girl can ruin their date this time. Instead of fighting them as he did on previous occasions, the protagonist decides that it's best to run away with his fiancée and takes her to a bridge where they can enjoy the fireworks show in the best way possible. But to their misfortune, the fun ends suddenly as Hiro arrives to spoil the moment. It turns out she was passing by the same bridge by chance, and what was a lovely date between two young lovers instantly turned into a friendly outing for burgers and life talks. However, the bad news doesn't end here because Nagi feels obliged to confess the truth to Hiro about her sister, and he's just a child they exchanged with their family at birth. Obviously, the protagonist skips some details of the story, like the fact that they are living together and that Erika is his fiancée. While Hiro initially understands that he can't tell her everything because it's a sensitive topic after a while when they're alone, we see that the atmosphere becomes a bit more tense than usual. She tells him that she doesn't want there to be any more secrets between them and asks that from now on, they share everything to know they can trust each other without the need to hide anything. While these two were talking in the distance, we see that Saki happened to be passing by the place. Despite the fact that you shouldn't be able to hear anything from that distance, we do see her starting her typical toxic scene as the spoiled child she is. This time, she also involves Erika in the scene. Saki doesn't trust Hiro's intentions with her brother, so to clear any doubts, both she and Erika spend the entire day keeping an eye on this girl to see if she's really as good as she seems. Every hour they spend spying on her, the two detectives realize that the girl is even better than she appears. They not only show us how polite and responsible she is, but we also see a softer side of her, where she gets along with everyone, especially with young children. Seeing all this, Saki gets even more annoyed than she already was because she can't stand that her rival is so perfect to the point that she hasn't found any weaknesses in her so far. On Erika's side, she's tired of playing detective and not finding anything in Hiro, so she decides to give her sister some good advice on how to deal with these kinds of people, and above all, how to handle her emotions. Erika tells Saki that while it's true that Hiro seems pretty perfect to be real, she won't know for sure until she talks to her directly, and that's when she'll find out what the girl is really like. The problem is that, being a spoiled child, Saki refuses to listen to anyone's advice, even her sister's. The best idea she comes up with is to run to Nagi's house to beat him up and swear to him that from now on, she'll study to get into the same school as him, thus proving who the real woman he should be with is. Although all this might seem like a joke, the next day we see that Saki is very serious about her promise. She even requests a guided tour of Nagi's school to familiarize herself with the facilities and requirements. In the midst of this, we learn that Hiro will be the one giving her the guided tour. This is where the real problem begins for the protagonist, because he's apparently afraid that Saki will say things she shouldn't about his private life. With this in mind, the protagonist decides to follow the girls around the school to stay informed about their conversations. However, to his misfortune, they get too far away, and with nothing else to do, the boy decides to intervene to prevent any disaster that could jeopardize his relationship and future engagement. By intervening in the girls' conversation, Nagi realizes that nothing bad was happening. Thanks to this visit, both Hiro and Saki have gotten to know each other better, so now they get along quite well, and you could even say they're good friends. The downside is that the protagonist doesn't fully believe this story, and by nightfall we see him more worried than usual. However, it's not just because his sister is now friends with Hiro, but rather because she wants to enter the same school to spend more time with him, which bothers him a bit. It turns out that Saki has always achieved everything she set out to do, but at the same time, she also won all the awards that Nagi won. While all this isn't necessarily a bad thing, the real problem arises when we're told that Nagi's academy is private and therefore Saki will have to earn a scholarship or else she won't be able to attend due to the high cost of tuition. For this reason, the protagonist decides to go to his parents to tell them all the advantages and disadvantages of attending the school he goes to. They admit that affording such an expensive education could be a challenge, but they decide to accept it. They even tell him that if it's necessary to sell the restaurant and work extra hours elsewhere to pay for their daughter's tuition. Obviously, this sparked a heated discussion within the family, but to Nagi's good fortune, Erika arrives to calm the situation. With some kind words, she manages to convey that there are better solutions than working tirelessly, and that it's just a matter of effort to ensure that the smiles they share as a family can last for many more years. With nothing else to say, Saki gathers her things, says goodbye to her parents, and that same night decides to move out of her brother's house completely to finally start her study period with the goal of getting into her dream school. In addition to all of this, we find out that Erika decides to support her by organizing a study camp, where they will have the help of the two smartest people they know, Hiro and Nagi. To the misfortune of the plot, days later, we learn that Sachi got sick because she wasn't sleeping well. We see that by pure coincidence. Cheyenne overhears part of Erika and Seiki's conversation about the study camp. Without thinking twice, he asks them to let him join the group so that he can supposedly study intensively with the protagonist. But as crazy as it may seem, this ends up benefiting Nagi because this way he can have time to be with Hiro without any interruptions. Although this trip is a study trip, since the two boys have similar interests, they decide to make a pact to help each other create situations where they can be with the girl they like. Fortunately for both of them, this move works well because while Erika and Cheyenne go shopping together, Hiro and Nagi are left alone at home studying. From here on, several things happen. First, we can highlight that the protagonist goes to clear his mind by a lake near the place. Then there's another moment where we see that Erika and Cheyenne had a small issue that apparently left them in an uncomfortable atmosphere for the rest of the day. After a few hours, Erika rushes back home, and although at first everything seemed to point to her having to reject Shin's confession, what was really happening was that she had forgotten to pack her suitcase, and now she has nothing clean to wear after taking a bath. Obviously, this leaves Hiro somewhat bewildered because these are basic things that every girl should have with her. However, in Erika's case, things are different since she was always used to having her servants have everything ready for her. By evening, things return to normal, and we even see a very funny conversation where Shion proposes to the others that they do a bravery test. Since apparently there's an ancient temple nearby, he decides to use this as an excuse for each couple to enjoy some time alone in the temple without anyone seeing them. To everyone's surprise, Erika agrees to participate, but what's interesting is that she's only willing to do it if the rest of her friends agree that her companion for the night will be Nagi. Although this might seem like a romantic sign at first, it's explained to us later. First, we see a rather personal conversation that took place between Hiro and Cheyenne. It turns out that Hiro is very aware that Cheyenne is in love with Erika. She tells him that she can help him with a conquest plan because, in the end, this also benefits her. Although she tells us that her reasons are a secret, we can understand that her real goal is to find a way to keep Nagi away from Erika, so that she can be with him. Back with our protagonist and our waifu, it is explained that in reality, Erika chose the protagonist because she had no one else to trust to accompany her to the supermarket to buy her when she was trying to solve the problem. Hiro told her that it was okay not to wear anything for a day because no one would notice. So without further ado, she and the protagonist go to the supermarket, buy the and on the way back, they quickly visit the temple to take a photo as evidence that they arrived first. Later that same night, everyone gathers at the protagonist's house, that is Nagi and Erika, to have a barbecue. After finishing eating, the protagonist suggests that they do one more activity before going to sleep because this is the time when they can appreciate the beauty of the place they came to stay. However, after a while, everything is ruined due to some bad news he received from his mother via text message. According to what is explained to us, Saki's fever had been getting worse during all this time to the point that her parents had to take her to the hospital to give her fluids and have her rest for a couple of days. The thing is, when Nagi found out about this, he ran as fast as he could from the camp to catch the first train he could find in the city and get to the hospital as quickly as possible to see how his younger sister was doing. As expected, Saki is very happy to see her brother and even happier to know that he cares for her in such a frantic way. However, the interesting part happens the next morning when we see that when Erika returns home, in addition to asking about Saki, she tells the protagonist, "It's fantastic to have someone for whom you can run like that." Nagi, upon hearing this, remembers that Erika is still searching for that special person from her past, who we now learn is none other than the little boy we saw in the photo in her father's office. It turns out that it was also the same photo that was lying in the summer house. However, we didn't see this part because the only one who noticed this detail was Hiro just before the end of the camp. In reality, Soichiro placed that photo as a trap to create some intrigue among the group of friends. Although at first everyone thought that the boy in the photo was the protagonist when he was young, the answer to this intrigue is much more unexpected than we think. To better understand this part, Erika herself explains to us that there is another member in her family named Sosuke Mano. This boy is Nagi's older biological twin brother, but since the children were swapped at that time, she saw him as her dear Oni-chan, who unfortunately disappeared after a few years. This is where they also explain to us the reason why Erika seeks to become so famous on social media is to attract more people and hopefully find her dear Sebazuke. Now, in case you're wondering, even though the most logical method to find him would be to speak directly with his parents, that is, the Amanos, the problem is that both Suichiro and Ritsuko, his mother, completely deny the existence of another child. The point is that these emotions were triggered on the day they met on the bridge. Erika confesses to us that at first, she confused him with her Sebazuke because they are the same person, only with a slightly different age. But what is surprising is that for the protagonist, both this story and the situation in general don't surprise him in the least. As strange as it may seem, he doesn't pay much attention to the fact that he has a lost twin brother in the world, because in his heart, his only sister throughout his life will be Saki. Instead, he decides to focus all of his energy on helping his fiancée reunite with that special person from her past. Ironically, and despite everything seeming to go well up to this point, the next morning, Nagi begins to become paranoid with an idea that crossed his mind. In summary, he believes that Erika has stayed by his side only because she sees him as a substitute for Sosuke in her life. Fortunately, these thoughts don't last long, as after a few hours, he gets distracted preparing dinner and, above all, organizing his arguments and ideas for the meeting he will have with Soichiro regarding his lost brother. To everyone's surprise, Nagi somehow manages to secure an appointment to speak with his biological father. Although Soichiro initially tries to evade the protagonist's questions, after a while, he reveals some shocking news that makes things even worse. In a few words, Soichiro tells him that the arranged marriage between the Umenos and the Amanos is only to keep the families who adopted the swapped babies together. Following this logic, he tells Nagi that if he doesn't want to marry Erika because he doesn't like her, he also has the option to marry Saki. Since technically she is not his blood sister, there would be no problem in getting engaged to someone who is not from his true family. Without further ado, Nagi returns home to tell Erika what happened. Surprisingly, she doesn't get angry at all, as she seems to be quite accustomed to her father always pretending ignorance and ultimately leaving her with more questions than answers. With this in mind, the protagonist realizes that they will have to carry out this mission without anyone's help. Unfortunately, the situation is more complicated than it seems, as searching for your lost twin brother without revealing the problems of your personal life to everyone is not an easy task. Hiro notices this detail, and days later, taking advantage of their free weekend, she invites the protagonist on a bike ride with the destination of a beautiful view of the sea. As expected, the intention of this little date doesn't end there. Hiro confesses that she wanted to be the one to console him when he feels sad. Some time ago, when Nagi was also going through a rough patch, it was Erika who helped him recover. For this reason, Hiro wanted to make sure that it wouldn't happen again and to be only one present to comfort him when he feels down. Although this may sound somewhat toxic, Nagi appreciates these gestures. So without further ado, let's continue with the part where our protagonist's problems increase without him noticing. We learn that Sachi has been secretly meeting with Soichiro. Apparently, this man is using her as a spy to gather information about the progress of Nagi and Erika's relationship and at the same time, suggesting the possibility that she may be the one who ultimately marries the protagonist. The problem is that Saki is still very immature and doesn't handle this situation as she should. Instead of controlling her emotions, she explodes in front of her brother and suddenly starts treating him as if he were her personal servant. Amidst this tense situation, Nagi decides to seize the opportunity, as both of them had to go to the supermarket to do their weekly shopping. Although Saki initially displays her capricious side, she quickly changes her attitude because a childhood memory reminds her of why she has always trusted her brother's words. However, upon returning home, Saki behaves like a child again and inexplicably gets angry, claiming that Nagi only sees her as his sister. To make matters worse, she poses the question of what he would do if she asked him to marry her before Erika. Furthermore, Nagi's problems don't end there. That morning, he receives the results of the latest exams. Now he managed to bounce back from his previous fall and once again secure the top spot in the class. Obviously, this leads us back to the typical scene where Hiro leaves a letter in the protagonist's locker to meet on the rooftop, allowing him to repeat the part where he confesses his love. However, at this time, there's something different. The young girl's response changes to "I wish I were engaged to you." With this emotional bombshell by nightfall, Nagi's ego is through the roof, so much so that he doesn't hesitate to tell Saki and Erika everything that has happened. However, due to this imprudence, he and Erika suddenly find themselves involved in a trip to the beach, as according to Erika, this is the best way for a couple to clarify all doubts about their feelings. Without more to say, the next morning, the protagonist starts working on the trip preparations, even though he's not very excited about it. For him, this is a waste of time, but since the situation is different for Erika, Nagi decides to give his best to ensure these vacations are enjoyable for everyone. The curious thing is that on their way back home, our protagonist and Erika discuss not revealing to Hiro that they are living together. However, to their misfortune, she has already beaten them to it, as when they enter the living room to greet Saki, they come across the news that both of them had been studying there all afternoon. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, the young woman is not surprised. Strangely enough, she had already suspected that they were living together, simply because she once noticed that they both smelled like the same shampoo and body wash. Given that this piece of information is quite incriminating, let's move on directly to the part of the beach trip, where, as expected, we see some fan service scenes. The important thing about all of this is that, for some reason that the protagonist doesn't quite understand, Hiro has been avoiding him since they arrived at the location. To cut to the chase, Nagi decides to have a private conversation with her. And although the situation is initially uncomfortable, our young man tries to explain as best he can the reason why he, Erika, and Saki have been living together for a few months. Of course, things are not so easy to fix since they had promised not to keep any more secrets. Nevertheless, Hiro forgives him quickly because to her it's more important to see the protagonist repent for his actions. Before ending the conversation, she simply takes a strand of his hair and says, "Do it again, and I'll curse you." Setting aside the unsettling phrases Hiro utters, later that same day, Nagi once again acts a bit conceited in front of Erika and Saki. However, on this occasion, and taking advantage of being alone with his younger sister, he poses the question of whether she's in love with him. Apparently, after the protagonist apologized to Hiro, she warned him about the need to be very careful with her sister's feelings, especially in the romantic aspect. This could become a problem if their relationship is not clarified from the beginning. The problem is that this left Saki quite confused because she had confided in Hiro and revealed her secret. She knew that her relationship with Nagi was limited to a simple competition to determine who was the best in class. Or at least that's what Saki made Hiro believe the day they met. As expected, the protagonist still sees Saki as just his sister, so things are kept under control. Even later that same day, we see him taking a nude bath while enjoying the beautiful beach sunset. What's funny is that shortly after, Erika arrives to join him in the jacuzzi. Although at first they make us believe that she will also join without clothes, we quickly find out that it's not the case. In reality, Erika was wearing a cute swimsuit that she had bought especially for this trip. Just in case you were wondering, in the end, the only thing that happens is that the protagonist accidentally reveals his Titan, so we'll skip that part and move on to a new problem. It turns out that the Amano Beach house only has 2 large beds. This wouldn't be a problem for a normal family, but for our protagonists, the situation is different as the group consists of 3 women and only 1 man. However, they decide to solve it in the simplest way possible and draw lots to determine the pairs that will share the rooms. Coincidentally, Hiro and Erika end up as partners, while Nagi and her sister will share the remaining bed. As expected, things were going to get tense for the protagonist as Saki is in her rebellious phase, being a whimsical and tsundere girl. But to everyone's surprise, Erika also feels some tension. In one of those typical girl-to-girl conversations, Hiro suddenly asks if she would mind staying with Nagi. This question makes Erika very tense, and the next morning she gets up early to examine a couple of objects that have been on her mind since they arrived at the beach house. In short, after thinking for a while, she realizes that both the board game and the bath bubbles are things she used to use when she spent family vacations, especially when she knew that Susu was coming to spend time with her. With this in mind, just as the protagonist was heading to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, Nagi and Erika decide to split into pairs to search for more clues or important objects throughout the house. Unfortunately, they don't find anything valuable. They do discover a very old video game on a shelf that surprisingly shows a last game recorded just 3 days ago. This last detail suggests that someone was in the house before them, so Nagi, without thinking twice, believes that someone must be Suzuki. Following the same logic, they deduce that his brother must be nearby or even staying in the city center. At that moment, Erika catches up with Nagi to stop him and confesses that she's afraid of not knowing how they will react if they manage to find the person she has been searching for so many years and has not been able to find until now. The protagonist, upon hearing this, understands his fiancée's reasons but also assures her that she shouldn't be afraid of a meeting she has been waiting for so long. He will be by her side at all times to support her. In the end, they don't find any clues about Sosu's whereabouts, but that's not the most important thing. This experience has allowed Erika to gain the confidence she was lacking in relation to Nagi. This is how, with all the issues resolved, the next day the group of friends was able to pack their things and consider these exciting vacations at the beach house. However, before getting into the car, Hiro surprised the protagonist out of the blue. Without asking any questions, she simply told him to accompany her to a place she wanted to visit together to end their trip with an unforgettable memory. To avoid misunderstandings, in reality, their destination was a nearby temple where they planned to obtain a stamp in their stamp book. However, to add some intrigue to the situation, it happened that when both intended to head to the station to catch the train back home, they discovered that there were no trains in operation due to the impending heavy storms. As if this wasn't enough, a heavy rain began to fall shortly after. The protagonist had no choice but to find a place to stay until at least the rain stopped at such late hours of the night. Interestingly, in order to secure an affordable room, both Nagi and Hiro had to pretend to be a newly couple. This was the reason why we later see them sharing the same room and even the same futon. Although technically nothing unusual happened throughout the night, the situation became somewhat tense when an unexpected lizard caused both of them to fall into a rather uncomfortable position. I won't inquire too much about how it happened, but this situation Hiro to the point of asking the protagonist to engage in forbidden things. Upon hearing this, Nagi began to imagine various scenarios in her mind. However, in reality, what her friend wanted was for them to order some alcohol to try for the first time. Nevertheless, after this strange request and after cutting off any further motivation, the protagonist gave her a typical adult lecture, explaining that there is an appropriate age for everything and that they were not yet at the age to consume such beverages. Ironically, as soon as he finished saying this, the police appeared at their room's door. Apparently, the innkeeper had reported them for falsifying their age. However, it quickly became apparent that the police were actually Erika and Saki, who, jealous that Hiro had taken the protagonist with her, had decided to search for them to take them back home once and for all. Days after this major issue, on what seemed like a normal morning, our protagonists receive an invitation to a birthday party. Initially, it should excite Nagi and his sister because it's their father's party. However, judging by their expressions, we can deduce that this day isn't as enjoyable as it seems. As they explain to us, their father organizes a birthday party every year filled with activities, lights, and food. As the day progresses, we realize that the only one truly enjoying it is Erika, as her children are tired of repeating the same tradition year after year. The touching part of this situation is that Yuhai doesn't care about gifts, guests, or money. He dedicates this day to himself as a gift for having lived another year with his loved ones. Continuing on the same subject, after eating, Erika examines the Umino family album. In one of the photos, Erika sees a girl we hadn't seen before, probably a childhood friend of Nagi when he was little. Setting that aside, Naomi joins the conversation and confesses that before meeting Erika, she was afraid that her biological daughter wouldn't accept them as her parents due to their economic situation. The Uminos had even arranged a marriage with the Amanos, but now that they know Erika doesn't reject them, they consider the option of not fulfilling the engagement agreement and letting each one choose the path they consider best for their love life. Yuhai's party ends with this emotional family moment. The next morning, Nagi and Erika resume their routine, catching up on study sessions missed during their vacation. Unfortunately, the excessive effort causes Erika to faint hours later. Faced with the uselessness of Hiro and Saki, who only hinder instead of helping, Nagi takes on the responsibility of caring for Erika since he's the only one who knows how to tend to a sick person. Later that day, Nagi brings some delicious food to his fiancée, who gets slightly upset but, in reality, feels embarrassed upon realizing that her future husband knows her better than she expected. Nagi concludes the moment by saying that it's because they're committed beyond the small details, as in a marriage, they're there for each other through thick and thin. These words reach the ears of the other two young girls who were eavesdropping outside the room. They realize that the competition for Nagi's love is tougher than they thought, as they must surpass their biggest rival, Erika, his fiancée. In the evening, Hiro bids farewell to her friends, and at the same time, while all this is happening, Saki meets with Suichiro to inform him of the new developments in the young couple's relationship. Suichiro remains a mystery, but he makes it clear that his plan in the experiment called a pair of cuckoos is on the right track.